from local risk realities and voices in displacement. My name is Amura Philip, and I am from Root of Generations, based in Juba, South Sudan. We are a member of the global network of civil society organizations for disaster reductions, GNDR. I am on stage with two other members, Nisha from Nepal and Dana from Indonesia. GNDR is the largest international network of civil society organizations working together to strengthen the resilience of communities most at risk of disasters. GNDR aims to support communities most at risk, especially before, during, and after displacement, to withstand and transform in spite of the shocks, and to build disaster resilience of communities who have lost connections with the support, networks, and livelihoods. Many GNDR members work with both host and displaced communities to reduce risk in extremely challenging circumstances. The Making Displacement Safer program has provided an opportunity for several members to include perspectives from displaced communities themselves in research, innovative solutions, and advocacy addressing the risks they face. We are sharing experiences from this program today. We are joined in the room by community members, government representatives, civil society groups, NGOs, and international agencies inside here. You are all most welcome. We encourage you to continue talking together at the end of our presentation and enjoy an evening meal together. If you are joining online, you are welcome, and we are glad to connect with you virtually. We are grateful for the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance at USAID for partnering with us in order to facilitate this important conversation on addressing displacement challenges from the perspectives of those most at risk. As an agenda, after sharing the context of efforts to make displacement safer, this event will reflect on three topics: the local reality of complex displacement risks, how to include displaced individuals in durable solutions, and how we should incorporate local voice in local, national, and international policy. We then hope to have time for questions and answers. Those in the room can raise their hands. If you're here, you can raise your hands. For those online, please put any questions or comments you have in the chat box. GNDR are developing policy positions and resources on these topics. And also learning from this event will contribute to our network's ongoing journey to address displacement risks. Again, let me take you to South Sudan in the video that you just showed. South Sudan can best be described as a fragile state with critically weak risk governance. Barely 2 years after independence in 2011, it was in transition to make permanent constitution and vital governance structures. Unfortunately, the country descended into civil war in 2013. Consequently, over 4 million people were displaced, about 2.7 million as refugees, and 1.3 as internally displaced people, according to the statistics of UNHCR. Most of the IDPs are displaced to urban areas. But floods, 2018, peace deal among rival groups open opportunity to holistically address displacement and other governance issues. But floods and intercommunal violence in some parts of the country continue to increase displacement figures annually. We have worked with the displaced community in Gumbo on the edge of Juba, who have experienced the reality of this risk during the last months. As the news report showed on your footage we had at the beginning, in September 2021, flood caused the displacement to displace once again. Only last week, more new arrivals came from Magwi County after tensions between the host and displaced community there forced members of the host community to displace the host themselves. And critically looking at the risks that these people faced, we interviewed more than 540 displaced people to ask from them their perspectives on the disaster risks. Interestingly, you see there, their biggest threats were unemployment, lack of access to basic services, and poor sanitation. Others are listed in priority order downwards. On the flip side, they felt that their biggest barriers to addressing the risk were weak law enforcement, corruption, and low voice. We have worked with a group of displaced people in Gumbo to design an innovative approaches for reducing vulnerabilities of displaced populations in Gumbo Sherikat. The IDPs prioritized unemployment and chose entrepreneurship, business, and VSLA as workable solutions during Urban Living Lab to create sustainable livelihoods. What do we really want as GNDR? We want local voice in policies that reduce vulnerabilities of displaced populations in urban areas to get institutionalized in national and international systems. Root of Generations currently uses radios, TVs, social media, newspaper, etc. to raise the advocacy and also to build disaster resilience of the urban displaced. All the stakeholders we have mapped are responsible for sharing lesson learned. Displacement, ladies and gentlemen, is a national risk. This is our advocacy campaign right now. I now hand over to my fellow member, Nisha Shrestha, who works for National Safety Earthquake Technology, Nepal. Just before I hand over to you, I just want to tell you a little bit about Nisha. Nisha. Nisha is an environmentalist by profession and has more than 12 years of experience in the field of disaster risk reduction. She has been leading the monitoring and evaluation unit at NSET, involved in various disaster risk management and emergency response. Training courses conducted by NSET as an instructor and coordinated GNDR's views from the front line work in Nepal and South Asia, and is currently involved in making displacement safer in Kathmandu. Nisha, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Apura, for this introduction. Good evening, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm Nisha from NSET. So let me take you all to Nepal. So Nepal is a mountainous country in South Asia prone to multiple hazards. And within the capital city of Nepal, Kathmandu, we have more than 50 squatter settlements that exist there. So you can see this is the map of Nepal there, and the Kathmandu city and the settlement that we chose for this Making Displacement Safer project. So this settlement is a small settlement with 85 households that we chose for the project. And it's basically comprised of internally displaced population. The settlement is located in the banks of this big river of Kathmandu Bagmati River. And in between, the settlement is in between the Bagmati River and the river corridor road. This is vulnerable to many hazards and risks. So basically, it is an unplanned settlement in public property. There were multiple reasons for the displacement. We talked with them and we asked them, and they said that the study results said that basically it's because of the poor economic condition. Secondly, disaster, and thirdly, it's because of the conflict that were the main causes of displacement. And legal status, there's no legal status, so legal status has been a critical issue for that as well. Also, the reshuffling of the dwelling units was another problem. Those displaced population has been sifted from one place to another in during times. So that was another problem. Other issues were related to livelihood and basic infrastructures because of the poor socioeconomic conditions. The identified key risks were like poor infrastructure, lifeline facilities, pandemic was also mentioned by them, and frequent flooding as they are situated on the banks of the river. So frequent flooding, fire, earthquake, that makes the community more vulnerable. So poor socioeconomic condition and unemployment was another problem leading to risk of domestic violence and theft and alcoholism. So those with work in that community were also working very low-paid informal jobs as laborers, street vendors, and housemaids and cleaners. So this is the map that we produced, that we developed with Map Action. And you can see here the change of river morphology over time, which is creating more pressure to the displaced population. So while implementing the program, unexpected flooding incident occurred in the program area, the Nomanambasti community that we are working. The heavy rain in the upstream of the Bagmati River caused a flash flood in the river, and the river water entered into the community within a few hours, and the community was left submerged in water. The community at that time was not prepared for disasters, and they were panicked. And since we were working there, they consulted us and they contacted us for help. And we consulted with GNDR, and we actually provided immediate support to them. And that was a kind of big help for them for the immediate recovery at that time. So actually, if you want to know about the community, you should know about each individuals of the community. So through this Making Displacement Safer project, we sat with them, we talked with them, we interacted them, and gathered various data for the better understanding of a risk. So we basically did a stakeholder mapping at the community level and at the national level. We did the task force group meetings, we did the community interactions, and we did the VFL survey for the quantitative data, and then verified those quantitative data with the focus group discussions and individual consultations to verify the results that we got. So through the Urban Living Lab approach, we did the co-creation of the innovative solutions, innovative and durable solutions. It was the actually co-creation with the communities themselves. We partnered with academia, we partnered with the local CSOs, we worked with communities for the co-creation of the durable solutions. We did the capacity strengthening of the local actors for that time, and vulnerability capacity assessment was done, and this capacity gap assessment, which involved the community, led to identify the threats, and then what are the priority actions that the community need, and then we sat with the community and developed the action plans through the action planning workshops. So this way, through this Urban Living Lab, there was a joint identification of root causes, and new durable solutions were identified. So after the identification of these solutions jointly through the community, we kind of not only identified the solution, but we kind of implemented this solution with the community through this MDS program. We are supporting the community in implementing the prioritized action and making the communities build their disaster resilience. So actually, focusing on only one component will not lead to durable solutions. So we kind of actually focus on different communities, different components, and linked with the activities. So basically we focused on 4 different components, that is improved disaster resilience, improved physical infrastructure, improved livelihood, and improved well-being. So for improved disaster resilience, we train the community on search and rescue and fire response techniques. And then we are also planning to have an evacuation plan for that, and preposition the emergency supply equipments and the fire extinguishers in the community, so that in the next disaster, they are better prepared to respond to that. So this way, it will build the disaster resilience. For the infrastructure, we are supporting the maintenance of the internal road, which will be used as the evacuation route for the community. So again, everything has to be linked with the livelihood. So we are, to improve their livelihood, we are supporting them in income generating activities. We are planning to train them on, since most of the communities are the housemaids and cleaners, they are working there. So we are planning for professional trainings on as a house cleaning and housekeeping and caregiving services. So we are planning to do that. So this will, we will not only provide training to the community, but we will build their entrepreneurship and also support them in the job placement, so that they can lead their life better in the coming days. And we are also implementing activities to support for livelihood. So these all things some of the things we have already done, and some of the things we are planning to do within the project, within the program. So the next thing that we need to do is use of all this data for risk-informed development. So actually we did this as a piloting of a community. So it's a demonstration. What we need to do is gather the lessons learned from that demonstration and then replicate it and scale up it so that we can make displacements safer and communities resilient. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so moving ahead, I would like to now introduce my friend, Danang Ajari, better known as Dana. He is a researcher and deputy program manager of Resilience Development Institute, RDI, a think tank institute based in Bandung, Indonesia. Dana dedicates his research projects on topics of disaster and climate resilience and regional and urban policy. He has a huge interest in sustainable and resilient development with exposure to climate and disaster risks, risk governance, environmental justice, and urban social sustainability, including gender equality and inclusivity. Currently, he supports the Making Displacement Safer project and develops studies on displacement in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. So over to you, Dana. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nisha, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dana from Resilience Development Initiative, and I will talk to you about what we have been done with making displacement safer in Indonesia, particularly in Garud, West Java. So if you see here in the presentation, this is the map of Garud. You can see it's in West Java province. And one of the main issues that occurred in the displacement setting in Garut is basically about the flash flood in 2016. And it also affected more than 2,000 people have been displaced around the cities. And also there have been a lot of risks that occurred in the displacement area. There are 6 of them here that I would like to explain to you. The first one is the access and the lack of infrastructure, since most of the displaced community relocate to the peri-urban areas, which they have been lived for years in the city centers. They find a lot of lack of basic infrastructure because they live in more peri-urban areas, and also there's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of basic needs that they can find in the peri-urban areas. And the second one is actually about the policy and data integration, because in the regency itself, they have been a lot of issues related to the data that not segregated, and a lot of issues that not really there is no integration about the data in the multi-level, which in the regency and also the provincial, there's a lot of lacking in the data integration. And the flood risk itself, because most of them already relocate, but some of the community is relocated to the flood risk prone area, and it also affecting their livelihood. And the next one is the livelihood or the economy itself. And the economy, because they have been relocated to more of the peri-urban areas, and they lost their job because of the relocation. They face a lot of challenges in the livelihood. And the next one is actually about the about the social cohesion, because most of them relocate without their previous community. That's why there have been a lack of social cohesion with in internal of the community, and also the external one, which there's so many conflict with the host communities in their displacement areas. And the last one is residential status. After their displacement, until now they haven't received the residential ownership from the government, and it also really affecting them because they have been relocated for almost 2 or 3 years. And if you see here in the map, you can learn that the city center is around the 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 yellow dots, and the relocation sites it's in the more turquoise dots. As you can see here in the second maps, it's also a lot of risks that faced by the community. It's also there's also the landslide risk and also the flooding risks. Next, please. So what we have been done in RDI, we have been done a lot of data collection, advocacy, and also the finding durable solution. But for the data collection itself, we have done a lot of risk perspective assessment within the displaced community. And we also have a lot of workshop, a lot of capacity building, and many other things. But the further step that we will take is we want to ensure that there is a clear availability of the data for the displaced community, especially in what from the Garud agency that we currently working on, and we have committed to make sure that there is integration between the multi-level governance in the data. And the next one is advocacy. Next, please. The advocacy, we have been done a lot of things regarding with the local stakeholders and also provincial stakeholders and national stakeholders. However, it's still ongoing steps, and we're trying to reach a lot of stakeholders to join with us. And we also have the task force for these displacement issues in our case study. It's within the government, the local university, and many other stakeholders that related to the displacement. And for the future ahead, we also try to make sure that we can advocate the issue of localization in the displacement issues. And we try to make sure everyone knows about these displacement issues in national, or regional, or maybe international. Next, please. And the last one is finding durable solution. Uh, the ongoing one is we have been done a lot of try to finding a durable solution for the community. We have done an approach called urban living labs. So urban living labs is basically the space, the safe space for all the community, all the stakeholders to express what they need for their displacement issue and their livelihood. But we're currently on the state of the implementation. But before we also implement the co-creation and the exploration. And the final durable solution itself, we're currently in the implementation state when we have find a solution for them, and we try to implement and enhance their capacity by a lot of trainings for the displaced community. And one of the the main point that I would like to share in the durable solution itself is the durable solution is not a one stakeholders or one part works. It's a joint work, and we can find durable solution without the community or without the stakeholder related to the displacement. So it is the main point of the durable solution that we could share to you about in this session. So I think that's all from me, but we will have a little bit briefing from the project coordinator of Making Displacement Safer project, Alice. So Alice is a project coordinator for GNDR, and also there is driver lead for forced displacement in GNDR. She will present some global findings on the research completed in 11 countries from our Making Displacement Safer project. Alice, please. Oh, I'm sorry. So I also have I want to tell you about my videos, our videos from the displacement settings in Garud. So this is the video about the displaced communities perspective and displaced communities condition right now after their relocation. So please enjoy the video first. Thank you.
As a country that is prone to disasters, Indonesia has experienced fluctuating numbers of internally displaced persons in the last decade. The flash flood in September 2016 affected 6 sub-districts. More than 2,500 houses were damaged, and roughly 2,500 people were displaced from their homes. The local government decided to relocate those affected to 10 different locations in the periphery of Garud Kota sub-district, which are far from the city center and have minimal access to economic activities and basic facilities.
Jam 11 kirang 20 menit eta nu paling dahsyat nu paling ageng.
Cak ieu anu tos kekalelepan. Lan abi ieu pabelit sareng ieu tangkal sukun sampean. Mun teu pabelit na abi bakal teu aya meureun. Dugi ka bumi abi lumayan nyerai teu aya sareng carogena murang kalina kena nangis.
Disasters cause the displaced communities to be more vulnerable, and efforts are needed to make the displacement safer for the displaced community. Making displacement safer is a project to seek locally led disaster risk reduction solutions to challenges faced by the displaced communities to increase understanding and innovative approaches. One of the activities in this project is called Urban Living Labs, an approach to formulate durable solutions for the displaced population in Garud, which aligns with the Words into Action guideline.
Kenalan apa yang teno transportasi nu janten bingung teh teu gaduh kendaraan nyalira teu gaduh kendaraan teh tebih pacabakan kitu janten tebih wae nama
Alih ka ditu jak sedih biasa abah ditu walaupun abah tukang kuli walaupun abah tukang beburuh 15.000 20.000 katuang ai kaayaan di dieu mah jang lapur kangge ongkos ge teu cekap bageur abah teh kitu.
Hoyong misalkan di dieu teh nya tiasa sapertos deui semula painten gitu.
Harapan kapayon mah gaduh modal teh hoyong nyana pemuda-pemuda nu ngalangur hoyong di daramal di dieu weh kajen sakedik sewang lah rezeki mah.
Therefore, it is our responsibility to strengthen and mainstream the words into action and the localized approach to find durable solutions for displaced communities.
Thank you. Thanks for a very moving film. Maybe just a round of applause to our 3 partners and members here for their presentations. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to highlight the findings from the global research, which combines the findings from the 3 communities we've heard about, but also 8 others around the world. And then we'll open the floor for questions and answers, comments, reflections. We want to make this conversation something that we can take forward together as a wider network. So just to highlight the methodology of Views from the Frontline. Views from the Frontline asked displaced persons in this instance a series of questions on their perspective of threats that they face, the consequences of those the actions that they think could be done to address those threats or risks, and the barriers that are stopping those actions from being implemented. It then also looks at their enabling environment, asking them if they've ever been in consultation with the local government in terms of designing or reviewing or giving feedback to policies and strategies and plans or actions affecting them. It asks them if they've ever been supported with financial means, and also if they have accessible, timely and relevant information provided to them before their displacement, during it or afterwards. So around the world, we interviewed, with our members, 4,900 displaced persons living in these 11 countries. Depending on the size or the size of the displacement issue in that country, depending on how many people we interviewed. So for example, in Iraq, in Mosul, we interviewed 600 because the percentage of population within that city was so high. The figure on the top left is 5,050, and that's because we also invited other civil society and local government representatives to also give their feedback on the same questions. And then mixed in with this, we had an open forum for our members, civil society members around the world, to share their stories of displacement, and we received 185. With all of that information, we reflected. We had a roundtable in December when we kind of showed our initial conclusions and had discussion with stakeholders to kind of verify what we were learning and concluding from this work. So the first finding is that 69% of the displaced persons involved in this research still continue to be affected by disasters. And I guess this ongoing vulnerability is demonstrated by the fact that loss and damage to particularly housing and livelihoods was highlighted as one of the major things that they continue to worry about, or that something that's affected them after they were initially displaced. The second finding is that displaced populations are at high risk of entering or staying in economic insecurity and poverty. We compared the length of displacement from respondents, and if respondents had been displaced for longer than 5 years, they were showing indications that the greatest risk they were facing was livelihood, unemployment, or poverty-related issues. But when you compared it with the displaced persons that had been part of a disaster that had forced them to leave their home within 1 year, their biggest concerns were a repeat of the disasters and floods. So the data seemed to show us that the longer it went on, the more that people were becoming entrenched into poverty or unable to get out of it. And also the most common action requested was addressing livelihood issues. The third finding was that the local government response to displacement always focuses on the short term and the single issues. In some ways, we understand that this is their mandate to protect communities, but it kind of questions the other rights of displaced persons that link to, for example, their ongoing protection and their provision of basic services. We enter a kind of caution here in that there is a clear difference of opinion on the risks that displaced people face, depending on whether you're a displaced person answering that question, a civil society person, or a government person asking that question. So there is a call there to really listen to the community and align as civil society what we think should be done with what the community thinks needs to be done. The next finding was that disaster displacement risk is increasing, particularly driven by climate change. There's been several seminars this week at GDPR that have highlighted that. If you look at the also the kind of other organizations that are doing research into displacement, such as IDMC, the levels of disaster displacement around the world every year are always higher than levels of conflict displacement. The next finding is that there needs to be an effective localized response is not yet the norm for addressing complex disasters. So time and time again, response was led by the national level and not by local government levels. And there was comments in regard to the financing of either preparedness before displacement, recovery, or long-term issues. That financing was never reaching the local level in the way that it was needed, either by the civil society, the community, or the government, the local government. And the last finding was around that clearly that displaced individuals, especially women, are not adequately involved in decisions that are affecting them. So over 2/3 said that they were not at all consulted in some of the decisions made that they were then kind of facing the consequences of, whether again that be before disaster, during disaster, or or after displacement. So I just want to quickly highlight some of the conclusions which are shaping GNDR's kind of policy position in this area. The first one is that coherent pathways to durable solutions must be sought for the urban displaced. The second one, that we need to recognize the critical role of CSOs in convening local stakeholders together to strengthen collaboration needed to address the multiple challenges around displacement and aiming towards those durable solutions. The third conclusion that we made is that we want protracted displacement to be replaced with durable solutions. We've interviewed people that are displaced and they say they're still in a position of displacement 20, 30 years on from an initial event and face multiple challenges along that road. So something has gone wrong in that they never feel they're in a place where they are well, they are thriving, they are safe. They still feel that they need that assistance that's associated with displacement. The next one is that we need to support effective government from the local level, governance at the local level to address some of these issues. And the final one is that we're calling for meaningful inclusion of displaced person in the policy environment that is affected them, and maybe a call around setting some kind of standards in terms of how community members should be involved in which decisions, or represented as those decisions from a community level go to government level, up to national level and even higher. So that's just a summary of our global findings. What we're going to do now is just take questions and conversation, and we want to reflect. I hope you can all contribute, listen, just as we kind of move into this next phase. So I'm going to take this mic and leave the podium. My first question to Dana. What have you learned about the reality of local risks as you address displacement in urban areas?
Okay, thank you, Alice. So there are 3 points that I would like to raise here. The first one is actually about the complexity of the risk in the displacement area, because somehow they're still lacking of knowledge about that the displacement risk is really complex. They're not just they are not just related to the disaster or climate change, but they're also related to their livelihood. So most of the community has been stated that they have been affected most by the disaster, but the more affected areas is their livelihood, and they look as the risk is more towards their livelihood, not necessarily about the climate change and also the disaster. So I think that's the first one. And the second one is somehow the comprehensive risk assessment is not necessarily reach the local level. We talk about a lot of comprehensive risk assessment, risk informed development in international, regional, and maybe national level, but in the local level, there's no comprehensive assessment related to the risk. So that's why the data is still lacking and the governance is not doing really well about the displacement areas. And the last one, I would also want to raise the topic about the assessment fatigue, because most of the displacement has been through a lot of assessment. They face they are tired of a lot of assessment by the NGOs, by the government, and by other stakeholders, and somehow they find the assessment is not working well, and they are tired and they don't want to cooperate well to give better data for us. So I think the assessment fatigue is one of the biggest challenges for us in in the conducting the data and also relating to what the displaced community needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And the same question to Nisha. So what have you learned about the reality of local risk?
I think rather than big scale disasters, the displaced population are more concerned on the everyday local risks, so such as the waterlogging, narrow roads, and fire, unemployment. So and basically no electricity. So these things were coming up rather than the big scale disasters. And in urban areas, if the displaced populations are there, then livelihood can be a major issue, but it may not be in the rural areas. So it's different. Therefore, we need to see through the eyes of the beneficiaries. We need to actually sit with them, talk with them, because every individual story is different. So we need to go to each and every individual person to know about the reality of local risk. So actually, through this MDS program also, we interacted with the communities, and we actually realized that the felt need, what we felt a need is actually different than the real need. So this ULL, for example, actually, when we thought the ULL process would facilitate a process in the discussion, before the community people were talking only about infrastructure, they were talking about a road, but now when we go on with consultation and interaction with the community, now they are more concerned on being disaster prepared and building their resilience. So it's different than what we felt needed than the real need.
Thank you so much. Now I've left my chair. We're going to call this chair the hot seat, and we've got some invited guests just to mix up the voices in the room and bring in different perspectives. So the first person who's going to maybe reflect on local risk is Teresa Karampatana. I hope I've said that right. She's the president of the Homeless People's Federation, living in an informal settlement in Metro Manila. Yeah, please come and join us on the chair. She's also working with Slum Dwellers International. So Teresa, I'd like to ask you to reflect on what you've heard from the panelists. How do you identify that? And is that similar to some of the risks that you're facing now? And also, what do you ask of this kind of different stakeholders in the room? What would your ask of them be?
Good evening. I'm so happy to be here and being part of this discussion. Actually, I was reflecting. I'm also a victim of displacement, but it's a conflict. So I left the rural area because of a conflict, and then went to an urban area so that I can have an education. My father can work. We can have hospital services. We can have social protection. So actually, for me, displacement can never be safe. It is the worst thing that could happen to a family, okay? Displacement can only be safe if it is voluntary, and you decided, and you're not forced to do it. So displacement cannot be safe, but can be managed if the communities get consulted, if the communities have the capacity, if the communities have the empowerment to really push their agenda and negotiate and be part of the decision making of the government and the other stakeholders. So for me, in our case, displacement have severe impacts on the education of the children, the jobs and the livelihood, family relationship, social cohesion, food food supply, transportation issues, safety and security. There are displaced people or relocated people in our cases that were removed from a river, near the river, to transfer. So they said we were moved from a flood-prone area and put into a death zone area because their experience of flooding, their experience of mudslides are worse than what they have in the area where they came from. Yeah, so for me, the question would be, sometimes we get fascinated with the drama of the people being a victims of disaster, and we get to be inspired to help them. But the question really is, what made them stay in that situation? It's because we did not help them before they were even in that situation. Meaning, I'm saying is that we should get to the bottom, because this is just ice on top. The real issue here is poverty. The real issue here, the insecurity. We are preparing for disasters, but every day hunger is there. Unemployment, insecurity, that's the core of the issue that the vulnerable people are facing. Why would I stay in near the river if I can buy a nice and safe house? Why would I stay in an informal settlement where there is so much problem when I can have a peaceful house, right? So for us in the Homeless People's Federation, we are helping people to really move them. So teaching them to save, connecting them with government, connecting them with partners so that they can be empowered and access some finances so they can buy a small plot in a safer place, so that they will not be evicted, they will not be victims of calamities. They can choose to live where they want to settle. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you for sharing your reflections there. I think we'll move to the second theme, which is around finding those durable solutions. I'm going to ask Amora, how do you think we can better bring that local voice that Teresa has just so adequately explained? How can we bring that local voice into finding durable solutions?
Thank you so much, Elise. I think one thing we have noticed during the VFLL survey is that these people, the displaced, know what the solutions are. It's just that they don't have the means to escape out of that problem. As you saw in our flooding from South Sudan, for example, they know those areas are prone to floods, but they just can't have a means to say, let's relocate to a higher ground. Yeah, so when we're having this and when we're having the VLF survey, we looked at these people, and by our judgment, we thought the real solution could be providing for them the basic needs that they needed. Not until we engaged them and they said, no, that is not what really we think. It is a big problem, but it's not our real solution. our real solution is that we need employment. Because if we get employed, we can solve other things, like we can even have houses later on. And so involving them in making durable solutions means their voices, which often is not heard, need to be amplified. And this is one of the platform we bring that low voice that they have, and through what we have the radio talk shows, we bring them there, and to make sure that they talk to the wider people, to the decision makers, so that they can hear their voices to have that durable solution.
Perfect, thank you. It was mentioned the Urban Living Labs, which, as Dana explained, is like a co-creation, a safe space where we brought displaced persons, host community members, local government, teachers, universities, experts in particular things, brought them all together around a table to discuss what potential solutions might be. So there's that mix of knowledge, but that the community members who are displaced are making the final decisions on what they wanted to kind of act upon. We mixed the Urban Living Labs methodology with something that Takeshi is in the room. So I'm now going to put you in the hotspot. I just wanted to ask you, your work with ADRRN, so Asia Disaster Risk Reduction Network, is around, you lead an innovation hub, so finding solutions to disaster risk. I wondered if you could reflect for us, was it different working in that, or using the techniques you've developed in the displaced community setting? Is there something we need to learn there, or was it the same? Maybe you could reflect on what you achieved.
Hi, everyone. Takeshi from ADR and Innovation Hub, and hello, Nisha. So in the innovation, when we think about innovation, we do quite a rigorous problem analysis. So that's more of a science part. But then there's that ideation of a solution that's more I consider as a art part. So you sort of work with your imagination. What could be the potential solution? Sometimes you challenge your existing assumption. Something that you think is bad could be something good. Then what does that mean? When we worked on this making displacement safer, what I realized was that there are so many additional challenges and restrictions that these people face, as compared to other more of a general development field. Like, for example, first of all, there are legal restrictions, like people's entitlements, legality of the issue, ownership issue, general uncertainty in their life. So that's a significant additional challenge that the people may have, which you may not have if you live in the area where your family has been living there for ages. The second one is the social capital. We rely on social capital. Community is the essential power of making a change, right? But when you move to a new community, you may not know anyone. You don't have these connections. You may not be able to call for help. So what do you do with that? Surroundings. Your surrounding may not be your ally anymore. What do you do in those circumstances? And the livelihood also. So, for example, you're a farmer. You're an organic farmer. Your soil is very important to you, right? You invest in the quality of your soil for generations. But then when you're displaced, all that is gone. All your assets that you rely your livelihood upon is gone. So no continuation of tangible assets. And so when you think about the livelihood of the people who are being displaced, there needs to be a pivot of their livelihood, but how to make that happen is a significant challenge. It's a drastic change. And what I thought I would also mention is I really admire you, because I think in such a complex, challenging time, both the people themselves, but also people who are facilitating that change really need a courage, to explore and test, and then really move forward with that investment for change. So hats off to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And you mentioned the legality. So our final kind of section or stream of thinking that we wanted to consider was around policy. Maybe Nisha, how do you think, or what needs to change to have local voice in policy? Do you have a policy? What do you think?
Well, actually, we have tried looking into the policies related to disasters and displacements. So there are many more policies on disasters, but this displacement is not considered in those disaster policies and strategies. So basically, first, for Nepal, first we need to have a policy on displacement, disaster displaced population. We actually did have a framework for a relocation and resettlement, but that was also recently after the Gorkha earthquake. So that's just recently developed, but we still need to have policies on disaster and displacement. So that is one part that we need to do. The other thing that I want to highlight here is that basically actually the displaced population, they are actually seen as then a second category citizens, like they are not included, and basically the internal displaced are considered at that, forget about the external displaced population. So first they need to be included in that, and the policies, the national policies, strategies should acknowledge them as a part of the student. Then only we can, develop policies and talk about the displacement policies. So first they have to be included and their voices has to be heard. And then the policies will actually be supportive for their displacement. Because, for example, just a small example here, for example, due to this limited, attention or inclusion into the policies, the displaced population have been more vulnerable because they don't have the land right. And either way they construct the houses. So they don't have the land right and they do not, and they construct the houses in an informal way, which actually adds on to their risks. So they become more vulnerable because the municipalities, even when they go to the municipality also, the municipality doesn't issue the building permit to them because they don't have the right. So this further aggravates the risk for them. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you for that answer. The floor is open. I wondered if there was any questions in the room. While you're thinking, put your hand up. We'll first go online. We don't want to forget about, I think there's 40 or 50 people online. So yeah, we don't want them listening in. We want them to engage. So Lisa, is there anything online you'd like to ask to any four of the members here?
Thank you. Yes. There are some questions for almost everybody. So I want to start with the first is for Nisha. Can you elaborate on how the displaced populations are working together towards rebuilding their livelihoods in Nepal?
Yeah, actually, there are many organizations working with displaced population. For example, Lumanti is here. There are women-based organization who is working for a displaced population, and basically with them we are kind of building their resilience capacity, building their capacity in disaster and even in the livelihood. So basically what we do with them is we train them for the income generating activities. We give them skill-based trainings. So it's not like only one organization can solve the problem. We have to do it in a collaborative way. So we work with all those organizations who are working in with the displaced population, and we train them and we to build their entrepreneurship so that their livelihood will improve. And another thing that I want to add here is that inclusion of local government is also very important, because when we with us the organization, it will be a one-time or two-time things like that, but it's the local inclusion of the local government will kind of build on the sustainability of the program so that they are better in their living. Yeah.
Thank you very much. For the other speakers, how are women, children, and elder people affected differently in displacement? And what measures should we be implementing to mitigate these effects?
Maybe I'll go to Teresa for that one. How are the women and other more marginalized displaced persons affected?
Hello. In our organization, mostly women are the managing the house. You know, they are the homemaker, so they do 2-3 jobs to survive. So it's a double burden for a female member of the household, because of course men can go to work and then provide funding for the family, but it's the woman who has to do the budgeting, taking care of the children, in their in the education of the children. So it's you know, it's a double burden for the women. So for us, we are really very keen and very focused on capacitating the women in their economic potential should be more supported. And then, of course, they're empowering them as managers of the household, and of course, their settlement, because usually men are out doing other things. So the women are the community managers. Yeah. So it's more of a leadership training, capacity building for the women, and of course, livelihood support. Yeah.
Thank you so much. A question here. And if anyone in the room has got a question, put your hand up and I'll bring the mic round.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Pauline Madiro. I represent the Kenya for Resilience, a voice for the local communities and the CSOs in Kenya. I love the fact that you talk about engaging the community, because in our context, when sometimes projects come, the people say that this is not what we wanted. This is direct from the donors' perspective. Now, the issue I have is, or the question I would like to pose to the panelists. When you collect the data, because we've had this problem where the community members say that people collected data, but we did not get the findings. We didn't know what they did with this data, but they just came and collected. So which feedback mechanisms do you have? Number two, I love the fact that you involve the government in your initiatives, but I heard one of the speakers say that they help in maintenance of the roads. And my reflection is this sustainable? Because I feel like maintenance of the roads is the role of the government. So when the project pulls out, what happens? How sustainable is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Dana, could you answer the first question, and then I'll move over to Amora for reflections as well.
Okay, thank you. But I'm sorry, can you repeat the first question, the main one? I'm a little bit.
Yeah, data collection and how you
Okay, so how we disseminate the findings of our data
back
collection
to the community population.
It's
yeah.
in it. So one of our main ideas in this project is we have to make sure that the project is transparent and all of the community knows what we done. So every 2 weeks or every month, every once in a month, we have like a meeting with the communities, and after the analysis that we currently that we have been conducted, we have them in one place, which we also do as a urban living lab approach. We told them what is the findings that we find, what is the findings that not related to what they have been experienced, and we also disseminated it with not only the communities but also the stakeholders, the government, the university, and many other local stakeholders. So the main the main points that I will bring here is especially about the transparency, because all of that you said before, they said that we don't know what to do next, and we also facilitate them with the meetings, everything. Then we make sure that they know after this analysis, what should we do? We done the urban living labs, and after that, we done the focus group discussion with the stakeholders and many other things. So yeah, I also totally agree with you that the community should know what's next and transparent with the project. Thank you.
Thank you. And Amora, just that question on how are you sustaining it? I know you're not completed with your actions at the moment, but how do you see it sustaining within the community?
Yes, I think she was asking something to do with the road and sustainability. Yes, most of this engagement, we have the community, we involve the local government, and to have really more durable solutions that we talked about. But in a situation where local government still doesn't have money, and the CSO or the NGO sometimes can take like a small bit of rehabilitation just to have, this is part of recovery. But real durable solution is meaning working with government to make sure that they prioritize the displacement, and so that they involve much more in long-term planning to be able to respond to such kind of scenarios in future. And this is where we are building from now. And thank you so much.
Finally, to continue with the sustainable topic, we are being asked about what actions have been taken to make sustainable the initiatives from MDS project at local level.
I'll come back to Dana. I think you've got good examples of how are you making some of the urban, oh, you've got the mic. How are you making some of the urban living lab solutions sustainable?
It's a really hard question actually, because the sustainability is quite a tricky topic to talk about, because we don't know what next, even we have estimated. But what makes our solution, the current solution is sustainable, is actually when I also said before that the durable solution is not just the community solution, but it's also the communities and also the stakeholder working together to find that durable solution. So that's why when we talk about the sustainability, we also talk about the stakeholder support. That's why we need to bring all the stakeholders together and they agree upon what the solution that we had. And it's one of the main points that need to be enhanced further, because most of the time the project is not including any stakeholders, or they just implementing by themselves, and it's kind of it's not sustainable as I might speak. And yeah, the main theme is they have to include all the stakeholders in them and make sure after we done the project, we done the solution, they can take care of what we have been done. And it also what we currently doing, we try to make the exit plan with the communities and also the stakeholders. So after we done the implementation of the solution, they can be independent and working better with themselves. Thank you.
There are several questions regarding gender, so I'm going to direct it to Nisha. Maybe she can help us. The first is, are there any particular initiative led by women in the displaced communities where you work? The first.
Actually, in the displaced community we work, there's no such initiative that has been led, but what we are trying to do is because the women's are the main people who stay back in the community and who actually think about the community, because the male members, they go out for work, and it's the, as Teresa mentioned, it's the women who do all the community management thing. So what we have tried to do is train the women workers in the homekeeping and caregiving works, and then so that they can actually earn money and they can have a sustainable livelihood for that. So we are in the process for that.
Thank you very much. And the other one is for Teresa. Sexual violence is compounded by income poverty. How can you help civil society organizations to deal with economic growth for women and girls in any region that you're working?
What we do with is really organizing and capacity building, giving them the voice, giving them the control, giving them the space to decide for themselves and be, empowered, confident to do and to say no if it's no, yes if it's yes. Because sometimes women are really pushed to the corner, especially when they do not have anything to put in the table, to provide for their family. But if they are capacitated, they have the means, they can have this power to decide for themselves. Yeah.
I have a question. Based on what Nisha explained, I'm Ramesh from NCT. In our finding, what we found was we had Gorkha earthquake in 2015. Many people displaced. There were, IDPs camp. Many of us from the civil societies also supported them, and they are back. But in this type of the settlements, it's not one bigger disasters. It's small landslide somewhere or the flood somewhere. But for the families, it doesn't matter if all 5,000 families are displaced at once or just my family displaced, because it's same thing for me. So those type of the small ones are the much bigger problem, because nobody give any attention to them, and that's how it compounded. And then the people from different communities, different areas, they came, and then they could not solve also because there is no attention at all. That was the case in Nepal. Is it everywhere that? Because you have also bigger disaster displacement that you showed in in Indonesia, and then which one is actually more serious in that sense? And then our attention from civil societies, are you doing the right thing?
So Amora, yeah, reflection on those small disasters. Is it the same in South Sudan? Multiple crises, not just a big issue, and are civil society really able to address that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Quite hard, but let me just say, there are those small-scale displacements that happen every day, also in South Sudan. For example, we have intercommunal clashes, and these displaced people, probably on a low scale, but a whole accumulative of them also bring disasters. So the difference is this: the ones that come in a large scale tend to have real attention in the beginning. They probably have better response in terms of immediate needs. But these ones that happen in a small scale, they go silent, but people undergo similar needs. So as civil societies, we need really to differentiate these two. We need really to be intelligent enough to identify this displacement that happens closed doors, and at the same time that happens in big doors.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. My name is Kusal. I am from Cambodia. Probably not the question to the panelists, but also this kind of the consideration of the question, because that's in the first day of I came here and also until today, especially the finding that you found. I have observed that mostly we can find only the physical intervention or physical support. But based on the experience in my organization, we have been working for trauma, for any depression, more than 25 years with the disaster, with the victim of human trafficking, something like that. We found how to build resilient is not only physical support, mental support is the most important. Recently, during COVID-19, you know that here, domestic violence case, raping case, sexual abuse decreased double, because we found that because of the trauma, depression in the families, because blocking red zone, so people more depression, and so this is very important. So I could not see any kind of finding on this kind of trauma impairment or something like that related to this. So my question, in case that we can do or we can any kind of inputs or more strategies on the consideration of the trauma or any emotional treatment into our intervention, and also this is the kind of the resilient building. And also that another question I want to ask to the panelists as well, based on your experience on these displacement people, you think that trauma or any kind of depression happened to them or not? Yes, thank you.
Dana, are you able to respond to that?
Thank you for the question. It's interesting topic to tackle in, because most of the, how could I say it, the displacement community in our case study is have been facing the disaster for since 2018. So there has been three or 4 years after we come in, and to be honest, we have not necessarily looking for the physiological intervention or the psychological aspect of the displacement and many other things. But some of the findings that we find, there are some of the marginalized community that affected more by the displacement or the disaster itself. So what I mean by that is the woman is having more trauma than many others that are displaced, and also they find their self-esteem is getting lower after the disaster and the displacement itself, because they find they not seen by the government or any other stakeholders, and they have a low self-esteem by that. And what we do with that findings itself, we have been working on with the local disaster and management agency, and we're working on the training on how to recover from their displacement. And yeah, we try to make sure they have the self-esteem on making more make their self more resilience further. So I think that's what I can say.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that question. I think there's an element there of trauma and psychological care that we need to build into the global solution. And this project has not been perfect. We've learned a lot from it, and maybe that's something that going forward we need to also consider in our work. Unfortunately, we're coming up to time, and we have dinner, and I don't want the food to get cold. We have our final hot seat member, which is a member from the local Indonesian government. So Mehdi, who's also part of RDA, is going to ask his question to his government representative and also translate for us. So the floor is yours, Mehdi. Thank you.
My name is Rizal from NDMA of Indonesia. Sorry, I use bahasa. Jadi penanganan pengungsi menjadi suatu hal penting buat kami di Indonesia, karena sejak tahun 2013 lebih dari 1 juta penduduk yang harus mengungsi akibat bencana. Dan terakhir 2021 ada sekitar 7,6 juta pengungsi.
Okay, so the case of displaced population in Indonesia is very important. We have the newest update itself in 2021, more than 7.2 million of the displaced have been scattered in Indonesia, actually.
Atas dasar permasalahan tersebut, kami berusaha menguatkan regulasi dalam penyelenggaraan untuk penanggulangan bencana. Jadi 2016 kami coba menyusun satu sistem, command system for disaster yang melibatkan seluruh unsur mulai dari pemerintah, lembaga non pemerintah, lembaga usaha dan organisasi kemasyarakatan.
Okay, so the government is related to the displaced population itself is already conduct some improvement related to the regulation. So based on the regulation in 2016, the government already produced a regulation related to the command system center, actually. So this regulation is concerning about disaster emergency management command system, where in its implementation, it involves all the multi-stakeholder related to the government, non-government institution, private sector, and also the community organization.
Dan pada 2018 kami telah mengeluarkan satu peraturan tentang penanganan pengungsi di Indonesia. Jadi penyelenggaraan penanganan pengungsi diatur melalui satu regulasi.
Related to the displaced, the government also produced the regulation related to handling the displaced, regulation number 2018.
Saat ini kami sedang mengembangkan suatu program namanya Desa Tangguh Bencana, jadi Disaster Resilience Village, di mana program ini kita mengorganisasi masyarakat di tingkat desa agar dia bisa melakukan sesuatu penanganan untuk pelayanan dirinya sendiri pada saat awal kejadian bencana. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua juga tujuannya adalah untuk menguatkan ekonomi mereka pada saat situasi jadi bencana. Dan program ini memang baru kita cobakan. Jadi kami coba merekrut fasilitator-fasilitator dari teman-teman dari NGO yang akan memfasilitasi penguatan desa tersebut.
Okay, so the government also have the program Disaster Resilient Village. That this program is not only focused in the physical aspect of displaced person, but also involve the economic aspects. So in the first phase of the disaster, in the preparedness, it also prepare the displaced for involved in the mitigate the disaster. And also related to economy, this program also have aims to enhance the livelihood related to the displaced. So they doesn't only focus about the mitigate the disaster, but also focus to increase the economic livelihood of the displaced. Actually, related to the involvement of the civic society organization, this program also collaborate with civic organization. They recruit them as a facilitator in implementing this disaster resilient village.
Yang berikut terkait dengan bantuan pemerintah terhadap untuk penggantian hunian tetapnya mereka yang rusak bagi pengungsi. Kami dari pemerintah itu ada program perbaikan untuk permukiman bagi masyarakat pengungsi yang terdampak. Ya. Dan ini dilakukan juga kerjasama dengan teman-teman dari NGO, seperti contohnya sekarang yang ada di Lumajang.
So the government also have a regulation to rehabilitate houses of the displaced that affected by disaster, and this program also
involve the engagement of the civic society organization also. And this program, the newest update itself of that this regulation is already implemented in the Lumajang Regency in East Java, Indonesia.
Can you thank him for his work and his collaboration with local communities at risk, especially those placed? And thank you for your time.
Terima kasih Pak Wisra atas keterlibatan partisipan dan masukannya terkait dengan pemberitaan polisis di Indonesia.
Thank you. A round of applause for all of our panelists, please. Thank you so much. Vijay Kumar is the Executive Director of GNDR. So he's going to say a few thank yous for this event, but also highlight some of the perhaps next steps we'd like to take. And then we have a special performance that we would invite another community member just to perform as we close. Thank you, BJ.
Thanks, Alice. And thanks all the panel members. We're extremely grateful to have you here. And it has been a brilliant learning as to what you have done. Dan, Teresia, Nisha, and Philip. It's great listening to you. Absolutely brilliant listening to you. Thank you very much for telling us. Oh, sorry. Oh, you know, so actually, Elise prepared me quite well, but I didn't have time to rehearse. You do the rehearsal, yeah? I was just thinking. Okay, first let me give the thanks. Let me finish that part first. And thanks to all the participants. Thanks to obviously the online participants. Thanks to our partner organizations, Urbano Fra, platform on disaster displacement, yeah, our NRC, and our great friend, my great friend Takeshi, who actually came and talked here. Did I miss anybody? MAP Action, and obviously the government of Indonesia. We are grateful for partnering with you. It has been fabulous. And without BHA, we would not have been here in terms of what we have achieved. And it is brilliant to have BHA partnership with us to proceed with this one. I was just reflecting. When I was listening to you, I was reflecting. In 1999, there was a super cyclone in Odisha, in the eastern part of India. 14,000 people were dead. And they were displaced. So they were displaced from the resource. So when they were displaced from the resource to which the access and control, their own access and control was essential to live a life with dignity. For them, it was essential, the land that they used, the board that they used, the tree that they used, all those things they were actually displaced from. So that was one thing. So I saw that when you were actually displaced from your own resources, then you are disproportionately impacted as well. It's not that everybody is impacted the same way. Some people are more impacted. From among them, the women are more impacted, the elderly persons are more impacted, children are more impacted. So that is what we saw in 99 super cyclone, where 14,000 people died, and the people were mostly taken out of that area which was cyclone prone and which was impacted by cyclone. They were taken to hinterland, and many of you sitting here might actually have gone there and seen that work in eastern part of India. So there, what happened as a response? The two things that I will actually like to reiterate here. One, once they were displaced from the resources, their livelihood was completely devastated. Yeah, and because they were disproportionately impacted women, I'm telling you, when we conducted a study immediately, the red light area, the number of girls imported into that red light area increased by 34%. I'm talking of 99. The people who were trafficked from there to brick clean, what you call that, brick clean, what they make the brick cleans, yeah, whatever they call that. So they were actually trafficked, the boys were trafficked to work there. So that happened in 99. Let me take you to 2010, where Haiti happened. And Haiti happened, 100,000 people were actually, if I remember the numbers, more than quite a huge number died. Yeah? And same experience of trafficking of both girls, boys, and displacement from the resources. Complete displacement of the resources. Then come to now, I take you to 2013 in Kenya, in Sub-Saharan Africa. The drought happened. The people who are dependent on they were nomads. They're dependent on cattle. Because the drought was there, they were actually moved from one place to another place. And when they're moved, they didn't know other livelihood. They were forced to practice settled agriculture. That is not their cup of tea. So they were actually completely displaced from there. And if I remember, the girls were married off, even if they were 8 to 9 years old. Reason is they could get the bride price. I'm telling you the stories, case studies that we collected, the life stories that we collected. The stories is the same. And if you look at it, what happened in the whole process, suddenly, that one is they're displaced from the resources, they lose their dignity anyway, then they suddenly become invisible. You don't think of them. So you actually give the money, once you give the money for the Sub-Saharan Africa, and then you thought that they're all settled down. That is not how it happens. So your response is ad hoc. I'm talking about you, including myself. Yeah, our thinking is ad hoc. Our plan and response is always ad hoc. In which short-term responses, not a longer-term one. So that's the first thing, that you suddenly they become invisible. Not only invisible, now suddenly they become criminalized. Because actually what we think that they are responsible for that because they're displaced. You came by a boat, that's your body problem. So you become a criminal. Suddenly people who are coming from one area, they had everything. They lost because of a hurricane, because they're in Caribbean, or because of a cyclone, because they're in eastern part of the Bay of Bengal areas in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or India. You lose everything. Then you suddenly find yourself, that actually you have been criminalized. So you have suddenly become criminal, and government, the host community is asking, why the hell are you here? And the government is asking, show us the card. You cannot work here. This is what actually happens. So this is what actually happens. And that is what we are hearing here. And this needs a longer term intervention. First. Second, it needs that we need to continue to listen to them. Continue to listen. If they have the problem, they know what they're experiencing. With my best efforts, I cannot understand and appreciate what they're experiencing. So let's listen. Let's actually listen and allow the community to make their own plans. Co-create in the urban lab. That is what we are trying to actually do within this particular effort. And that is what we want to also replicate wherever we can do it. Now, as a follow-up thing, what we are trying to do, we are setting up first a working group, a task force. That is what actually where we will be inviting you to be part of this task force. As much as it is possible, if you can be part of it. Elise has actually set up a displacement working group. So that's what, if you can actually offer yourself your input, so that we can co-create a process to go forward. That's the first thing that we can actually think of doing it. And the second thing, I was just thinking, like, it is essential that let's not stop here. Let's take it forward. Let's actually see that how we can take it to high-level political forum. How can we take it to the top? The same experience, like say, end of the day, climate change is also creating a havoc now. Now, how we engage these displaced populations into the debate that we are actually talking about. That actually involves the three things that we are talking of, our priorities as GNDR members asked us to do, the loss and damage, adaptation, Santiago framework. The second one is primarily focused on women and the impact of the climate change, also include inclusion. And third, how can we have transparent, accountable, localized financing? So let's see how that actually relates to this aspect that we're actually talking of in the displacement. So I take this opportunity to thank you again, all of you. And I actually found this program absolutely brilliant. Thanks a lot, Elise, for organizing it so well. And I can see that everybody, all our colleagues are doing a collective work. Thanks all of you. I can see all of you, Ishita, Lisa, Felix, Becky, who else Adeso, all of you who, if I forget anybody, please actually forgive me. Thank you very much for your time. As you said in the beginning, that we'll listen to the communities. Let's end with listening to the communities. Now I'll take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Andre. First part is difficult to pronounce, yeah? So please pardon me for that. And actually he is going to take us to play music. He's from Nandang, yeah? I know this part of the world a little bit because I worked here during tsunami response time. And there is a traditional song which is from that region, which is about the tsunami. They call it smog, yeah? That traditional song could manage to actually save thousands of people when the tsunami happened. This is an alert. So over to you, Mr. Andre. After he finishes, all of you are really welcome. Please join us for dinner and then continue the conversation that we have. This is the time that we need to think through together. This is the time that we need to commit together to make a change. And that change can only happen by being led by the people who need to enjoy the impact of the change. They are the communities most at risk. Thank you very much.
Gelan mo saola surito inang masola semola lamanok sauham wilada la sesewa Mahea mihawali panome me sengatengi nume mo linon wa mo kedang kedang. Dengarlah suatu kisah pada zaman dahulu kala, tenggelam suatu desa, begitulah dituturkan. Jika gempanya kuat, disusul air yang surut, segera cari dataran tinggi agar kita selamat. Itulah Smong namanya, sejarah nenek moyang. Ingatlah semua pesan dari leluhur petua Simulu Island. Thank you, terima kasih.
Keep talking.